In the world buzzing with loud noises and flashing screens, let's journey somewhere different. Let's rediscover the magic of traditional storytelling through the simple joy of reading stories aloud. Welcome to the WorldStoryMind, where stories come alive in your mind. Konnichiwa, my friends. That's how you say hello in Japanese. And yes, tonight's story is inspired by a folk tale of Japan called the Momotaro, the Peach Boy. But as usual, before we get into the story, let's learn a little about Japan. So Japan is an island nation in East Asia, made up of 4 main islands and thousands of smaller ones, like a giant puzzle of land and sea. It's located east of China and Korea, with Tokyo as its dazzling capital, full of bright lights, busy streets, and some of the yummiest foods ever. Japan is a land where ancient samurai castles stand tall. And just around the corner, you'll also find a robot cafe serving food. Respect is really big in Japan. People bow to show each other respect, and this is basically how they meet and greet each other. Oh yeah, about the food. Have you ever tried sushi? Or maybe a warm, slurpy bowl of ramen? In Japan, food isn't just taste, it's art. The Japanese ice cream dessert, mochi, is one of my favorites of all time. Talking about clothing, kimono, a traditional wear, a beautiful flowing robe tied with a big bow, is usually worn on special occasions. But if you visit Tokyo, you might see something really fun. People wearing wild and wacky fashion, think bright colors, funky hairstyles, and even outfits inspired by cartoons. Isn't that fun? And in Kyoto, you might even see a geisha dressed in a stunning silk kimono with white makeup and elegant hair ornaments, gracefully performing traditional dances. Okay, ready for some fun facts about Japan? Did you know there is an island called a cat island? Aoshima is filled with more cats than people. Meowgical! Okay, now moving on to another fun fact. Japan is considered the vending machine wonderland, with over 5 million vending machines selling everything from hot soups to toys. Cool, right? Okay, now that you know a little bit about the country, let's get into the story. A long time ago, in a quiet little village where golden fields danced like ocean waves and the forests hummed with the songs of the birds, there lived an old couple. They were kind, they were loving, but oh how they wished for children. The little cottage was warm and cozy, but it felt very quiet. There were no giggles, no tiny footsteps, just the crackling of the fire and the whispers of the wind. Until one magical day, while working in their garden, old man suddenly stopped. "Eh, what's this?" he said, rubbing his eyes. Right there, among the twisting green vines, was something strange. A giant peapod. And not just any peapod, no. This one glowed. It shimmered in the sunlight, almost as if it was waiting for them. It was unlike any peapod they had ever seen. As big as a pumpkin, and very warm to touch. So the old woman reached out with trembling hands. Tap, tap. And the moment her fingers touched the pod, pop! It burst open. And inside, curled up like 3 little beans, were babies. Yes, 3 tiny baby boys, and oh, they were so special. Their hair wasn't black or brown like other children's, nope. Each had hair bright as unusual as the color of the sunset. The couple gasped. "Oh, look at them. They're perfect." They scooped them up, holding them close, and gave them names. Shiro, the eldest, had soft white hair that sparkled like fresh snow. He was quiet, thoughtful, and his deep eyes always seemed to know more than he let on. Eika, the middle child, had fiery red hair that stood up in wild clusters. He was loud, bold, and full of energy. When he got mad, watch out! His temper was as quick as the summer storm. Then there was Midori, the youngest, had bright green hair, as wild, as tangled as the vines he was born from. He was always giggling, his eyes full of mischief. Like, what's he up to now? The old couple adored their new sons. But didn't take long before they realized that they were not ordinary children. Shiro could hear people's thoughts. If he whispered, his words floated straight into their minds, like a soft breeze carrying secrets. Eika was so powerful that when he got angry or upset, the ground shook, the wind howled, and the storms crashed through the sky. Oh dear. Midori's laugh was so magical that anyone who heard it burst into uncontrollable giggles. Even the grumpiest person would end up rolling on the floor, gasping for breath. The old couple loved them so deeply, but they were worried. The world may not understand our children, they whispered to each other. So they made a decision. We must teach them how to control their gifts, they said. But no matter how much they tried, accidents just happened. Eika was not the kind of boy who could sit still and stay calm. Oh no. His fiery red hair wasn't just for show. His temper was just as wild. His parents always told him, Eika, you must learn to control your anger. But that was easier said than done. One day at school, things went terribly, terribly wrong. It started when a boy named Goro, the biggest bully in the class, leaned over during a writing lesson with a smirk. He whispered, "Why's your hair red? Are you part giant?" The other kids snickered. Now Eika's ears burnt. His hands clenched into fists under the wooden desk. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He tried to ignore it. He really did. But inside, his anger boiled. It bubbled. It rumbled like a volcano about to. Suddenly, the entire classroom shook. The wooden desk jumped off the ground. Ink pots tumbled over, spilling black ink everywhere. The students are grabbing onto each other and their chair. The teacher clung to the blackboard, shouting, "Earthquake! Earthquake!" Someone shouted. Panic exploded throughout the school. Kids ran outside, pushing and shoving, their faces pale with fear. But Eika just sat there. His breath was fast, his hands trembling. He knew the truth. This wasn't the earthquake. He had caused it. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to calm down. Slowly, the rumbling stopped. The desks stopped shaking. The ground was still again. That night, when he got home, his parents were waiting. And oh boy, they did not look happy. "Eika," his father said, his voice firm, "you must learn to control your anger. Someone could get hurt." Eika gulped, looking down at his feet. He hadn't meant to scare anyone. He just couldn't help it. "I'll try," he mumbled. But deep inside, he knew staying calm was going to be very hard. Now Midori, the youngest, was the real troublemaker. But not the bad kind. No. He didn't break things, get into fights like his brother Eika. Instead, he had a different kind of power. The power of laughter. His laugh was magical. The moment people heard it, they couldn't help themselves. They giggled, they chuckled, they howled, until their bellies hurt. But one afternoon, he took it a little too far. It happened in the village square. The elders sat in the circle, their faces frowning, in deep thought. The villagers gathered around, silent and serious. They were discussing something very important. The growing concern, the growing threat of the giants. No one smiled, no one laughed. The air was heavy. Midori, sitting at the back with the other children, kicked his feet. So boring, he thought. Then a little idea popped into his head. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone laughed a little? So Midori leaned forward, cupped his hand around his mouth, and whispered, "Why did the banana go to the doctor?" A few kids nearby leaned in, curious. Because he wasn't peeling well. Now his power magnified it. At first, just a few kids giggled. Then some grown-ups chuckled. Then the village chief himself burst into laughter. Oh no. Soon the entire crowd was howling with laughter. The village elder fell off his chair, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. Farmers rolled on the ground, clutching their stomachs. The blacksmith, a man so serious no one had ever seen him smile, was giggling like a child. What is happening? The chief gasped between laughter. They laughed and laughed so hard they couldn't breathe. Some villagers were so exhausted that they passed out. Right there in the square. Midori's eyes went wide. Uh-oh. He ducked behind the basket of apples. This was bad. Really, really bad. It took over an hour for the laughter to finally fade. That night, when Midori got home, he was in big trouble. His parents were waiting for him, for sure. And oh, did they look serious. His mother knelt in front of him. "Midori," she said gently, "laughter is a gift, but used the wrong way, it can be dangerous with your special gifts." Midori looked down, feeling guilty. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. I'll be careful next time, he mumbled. But deep down, he still loved the sound of laughter. He wanted to keep his promise, but just didn't know if he would be able to. Shiro, the eldest, always the quiet one, the calm and the wise one. His gift of reading minds and inserting thoughts was powerful, but had never meant to use it on others by accident. While his brothers had power that made people stare in awe, Shiro's gift was different. He could hear thoughts. And if he wasn't careful, he could place thoughts into people's heads. He had always been careful, always, until the night he wasn't. It was late in the evening, and the village streets were quiet. Only the dim lanterns flickered, casting long shadows on the road. Shiro had gone to fetch some herbs for his mom when he heard it. A voice, not so loud, inside his head. "Please, someone help." He turned a corner and froze. A young man was being held against his will. He was held against the wall by a thief in a dark cloak. The thief's voice was low and sharp. The man's hands shook as he fumbled for his pouch. His thoughts racing. I don't have much. What if he hurts me? What if I don't make it home? Shiro's heart pounded. He wasn't strong like Eika. He couldn't fight. What could he do? Then without thinking, a thought whispered from his mind. I should drop the knife and run. And just like that, the thief's eyes went wide. His hand trembled. Suddenly, he dropped his knife. It clattered onto the street, and without another word, he spun on his heel and ran into the night. The young man gasped, staring after him. What just happened? Shiro got nervous. He hadn't meant to do that. He hadn't meant to use his power. The young man turned to him, eyes wide. Did you do something? Before Shiro could answer, the villagers appeared from nearby houses. They had heard the commotion. What happened? That thief just ran. He just ran away. A woman gasped. She pointed at Shiro, her face pale. It was him. I heard something. A voice. But no one was speaking. Murmurs spread. A ghost? A spirit? A child clutched their mother's sleeve. Mama. My head felt funny. It was like someone was talking inside it. Shiro backed away, nervous. This was bad. Very bad. The fear in their eyes burned through him. He didn't mean to scare anyone. He was just trying to help. Without another word, he turned and he ran. That night at home, his parents sat with him by the fire. His father's voice was low and firm. Shiro, your gift is powerful. You must never use it lightly. This power is not meant to be misused. Shiro looked down at his hands. He understood now. Even a whisper could change everything. From that night on, he vowed to be more careful, but deep down, he wondered, what if one day he had no choice but to use it again? So after all the strange events, the earthquake in the class, the unstoppable laughter, and the mysterious whispers, the villagers started to change. They stopped looking at the triplets with warmth. Some whispered behind their backs. Some pointed when they passed them. Some even crossed the street to avoid them altogether. Their parents saw the fear growing in the village. So they made a difficult decision. You will stay home for now, their father said very firmly. You must learn to control, their mother added. Your powers are not curses, but they must be handled with care. And so the brothers trained. Shiro learning to silence his mind, Eika practicing calming his anger before it boiled over. Midori worked on holding back his laughter, but they knew deep inside that they could not hide forever. The night was as dark as the ink. The sky stretched like an endless sea of shadows. Only a lonely silver moon glowed above, watching, waiting. Below, the village lay still, its tiny cottages huddled together like sleeping children under a great starry blanket. All was quiet. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and soft hoots of owl perched high in the old tree. The villagers, tired from their long day's work, slept peacefully, dreaming of the next morning's warm sun. But morning would not come so easily. A wind as sharp as icy blade slithered through the trees. It whispered through the cracks in doors and windows, sending shivers down spine. Then, boom, a sound like 1,000 drums shattered the silence. The ground shook, the trees groaned, the torches that lined the village paths flickered, then died, snuffed out as if by an invisible hand. And then, from the darkness of the forest, they came. The giants, huge, terrible creatures with horned heads that scraped against the tallest trees. Their skin was cracked like old stone. Some glowed red like molten lava. Others were black as the endless night. Their eyes blazed yellow, burning like wildfires, and their massive hands curled into fists the size of boulders. They stomped into the village, snarling and growling, their breath thick with the stench of smoke and sulfur. One giant, massive and hulking, slammed his hands into the rice barn, ripping the roof clean off. The bags of rice tumbled to the ground like a waterfall. But the giant only cackled, stuffing handfuls into his greedy mouth. Another tall and bony, with twisting horns, kicked over a cart of vegetables. Crash! Cabbage rolled down the streets like tiny green boulders. A third, as wide as the mountain, raised his gigantic fists, and bam! A wooden house split clean in two. The family inside screamed, grabbing their children and fleeing into the night. And then, "Stop, please!" A voice shaky but strong cut through the chaos. The village chief, an old man with a long white beard, stumbled into the town square. His eyes were wide and desperate. "Why are you doing this?" he begged. "What do you want?" The giants laughed, a horrible, jagged sound that made the air shiver. Then the biggest of them all stepped forward, their leader. He was twice as tall as the others, with 6 curved horns rising from his head like a terrible crown. His crimson robe puffed up in the wind, his long claws clinking together like sharpened knives. But his eyes Oh, his eyes burned like two golden suns, piercing through the darkness. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You humans bore me," he sneered, his fangs glinting in the moonlight. "We take what we want. There's nothing you can do to stop us." The villagers trembled. Mothers clutched their children's. Fathers stood frozen, their hands balled into fists. But then, the giant leader's grin stretched wider. "Perhaps," he mused, tilting his head, "perhaps we can be merciful." The other giants chuckled behind him. "We will leave your village alone," the leader continued, his voice dripping with false kindness. "If you give us a child every full moon." A heavy silence fell over the village. A mother pulled her son close, shielding him with her arms. A father's fist shook with rage. Elders whispered hurried prayers, their voices barely louder than the wind. Give up a child? One of their own? Never. The cry rang out fierce and determined. A ripple of agreement spread through the villagers. "We will never do that. We will never do such a thing," someone shouted. The giant leader's grin turned sharp, dangerous. Then he purred, taking a mocking bow. "We shall return." The giants howled with laughter, their terrible voices echoing through the valley. With one final roar, they turned and stomped back into the forest, their bellies full and their thirst for destruction satisfied. For now. But the villagers knew the truth. The giants would be back, and the next time the village may not survive, unless someone stood up to them. And far away, in a small cottage at the edge of the village, three brothers tossed and turned in their sleep. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a strange and magical energy. The stars twinkled like tiny fireflies, and the moon cast soft silver glow over the quiet village. But inside a small cottage at the edge of the town, something extraordinary was taking place. Three brothers, sleeping side by side, were beginning to dream. They were having the same exact dream. At first, there was only darkness, a deep, velvety black like the night sky before the first stars are born. Then, whoosh, a golden light burst through, flooding their minds with warmth and power. From the light, a figure emerged, a radiant saint, cloaked in shimmering robes woven from moonlight and stardust floated before them. His beard sparkled like silver threads, and his eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. Tiny, glowing orbs like fireflies made of pure magic danced around him, humming softly. The brothers stood frozen in awe. This didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. Then, in a voice as deep as the ocean and as gentle as the morning sun, the saint spoke. "You were not born ordinary." The white-haired brother, wise and calm, felt the saint's word wrap around his heart like a warm embrace. The red-haired brother, fiery and bold, felt a surge of energy crackle through his veins like a storm about to break. The green-haired brother, always laughing, suddenly felt something he had never felt before. A serious weight settling on his shoulders. The saint's voice filled the air, strong and certain. You have been given your gifts for a reason, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The giants are not going to stop. It is time for you to fulfill your destiny. As he spoke, the golden light around him swirled, forming shimmering visions in the air. The brothers saw their village in flames, the terrified faces of their neighbors, and the towering giants laughing as they crushed the houses and trampled the fields. Then the image shifted. Instead of destruction, they saw themselves, standing tall, fighting back, driving the giants away. The white-haired brother saw himself locking eyes with the giant, whispering thoughts of fear into its mind until it stumbled back, trembling. The red-haired brother saw himself stomping the ground. Boom! A mighty earthquake split the earth and sending giants tumbling like pebbles in the landslide. The green-haired brother saw himself laughing so hard that waves of joy exploded from his chest, making the giants giggle and snort uncontrollably before collapsing into fits of breathless laughter. The vision faded. The saints' light grew brighter, filling every corner of their minds. "Your village needs you," he said, his voice ringing like a distant bell. "You've been hiding for far too long. Now is the time to rise." And then, whoosh, the dream ended. The brothers gasped awake at the exact same moment, their eyes wide with understanding. They looked at each other, knowing without speaking that they had all seen the same thing. The white-haired brother took a deep breath, his mind already racing with the plan. The red-haired brother clenched his fists, his heart pounding with excitement. The green-haired brother grinned, but this time, his usual playfulness carried a sense of purpose. No words were needed. They knew exactly what they need to do. And the giants? They would never expect what was coming next. With the saints' words echoing in their minds, the three brothers knew there was no turning back. They had a mission to defeat the giants and save their village. But they weren't ready. Not yet. So deep in the forest, where the trees stretched towards the sky and the wind whispered through the leaves, they began their training. And it wasn't easy. Shiro, the wise and the calm brother, with snow-white hair, sat cross-legged beneath an ancient oak tree with his eyes closed. He needed to control his mind powers, so he focused on a small little squirrel sitting in front of him. "Let's try this," he said. He thought, reaching out with his mind. The squirrel, before long, twitched, then suddenly started spinning in circle like a wind-up toy. Aka burst out laughing. "What are you doing? It looks like it's chasing its own tail." Shiro frowned. That's not what he meant to do. He was trying to make the squirrel salute, not spin like that. Anyways, determined, he turned to Aka. "I'm feeling very sleepy." He tried to send those thoughts to Aka. But instead, Aka didn't yawn. He didn't blink. Instead, he looked furious. "Shiro, why do I all of a sudden feel like I have to sneeze? Make it stop." Shiro's eyes widened. That wasn't right either. For days, his mind tricks went haywire. He made birds sing backwards, made Midori momentarily forget his own name, and even made himself trip over his own feet. Total disaster. But slowly, he learned. He figured out how to focus, how to direct his power with precision. By the end of it all, by the end of the week, he could whisper thoughts into enemies' minds, cloud their judgment, and even plant tiny seeds of fear. Now, he was ready. Aka, the fiery bold brother, cracked his knuckles. He was going to shake the earth itself. He stomped the ground. Nothing. He stomped again. Harder. A single leaf fluttered down the tree. Midori snorted. Wow, terrifying. The leaf must be so scared right now. Aka growled. All right, let's see if this works. He jumped and slammed both feet down with all his might. Boom! Crack! The earth shook violently, but not the way he expected. Instead of breaking in a controlled line, the ground split right under him. Aka yelped and tumbled backwards into the dirt. Midori laughed so hard he fell off a log. Nice technique, brother. Defeated by your own earthquake. Aka gritted his teeth. He needed more control. For days he practiced. At first he kept overdoing it, knocking over trees, making birds flee in terror, once even sending Shiro flying into a bush. Then he underdid it, barely making anything move in the ground. But with time, he found the balance. He learned to summon tiny tremors under an enemy's feet, create shockwaves strong enough to knock giants down without destroying everything around him. Now, he was ready. Midori, the mischievous and cheerful brother, climbed onto the tree stump and struck a dramatic pose. All right, prepare yourself for laughter, as laughter is the ultimate weapon. He puffed up his cheeks, wiggled his eyebrows, and made the most ridiculous face ever. Shiro blinked. That's your power? Midori grinned wickedly. Oh, just wait. He took a deep breath and let out a booming laugh, one meant to make anyone burst into giggles. But something was wrong. Instead of laughing, Eika cringed. Shiro flinched. Even the birds stopped chirping. Midori's laugh was so loud, so weird, and so bizarrely high-pitched that it sounded like a goat being tickled. Stop, 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 stop. That's horrible. Eika covered his ears. Midori froze. Wait, what? No one's laughing? Midori's face turned red. He had practiced his jokes, his silly faces, even his comedic timing, but not practiced the magic in his laughter. For days he tried and failed. One time his laugh made a rabbit faint. Another time he made himself laugh so hard he couldn't stop. Shiro had to put cold water on his head just to get him to stop and calm down. But slowly he figured it out. He learned how to control the magic in his laughter and how to spread it like a spell. By the end of the week, his giggles could bring down an enemy, making them clutch their stomachs and collapse in helpless laughter. Now he was ready. Standing tall, the three brothers looked at each other. They had struggled, they had failed, but now they were strong. Shiro's mind tricks could confuse and deceive. Eika's earth-shaking power could bring giants to their knees. Midori, his laughter magic, could make even the fiercest enemies crumble. They were no longer just three brothers. They were now warriors, and the giants would never expect what was coming for them next. Shiro looked at his brothers. We're ready. Eika grinned fiercely. Those giants won't know what hit them. Midori rubbed his hands together. Oh, this is going to be so fun. The battle was coming, and the three peas in a pod were about to change their village's fate forever. The night was silent except for the whispers of the wind. The full moon hung like a silver coin in the sky, casting long shadows over the village. Families huddled together inside their homes, their hearts pounding as they listened. Then, a chilling sound broke the silence. Thunderous footsteps, low growls, and the eerie clanking of weapons. The giants had arrived. They were even earlier than before, with horns curling like twisted tree roots, jagged teeth that gleamed under the moonlight, and eyes that burned like red-hot coals. The largest of them, their leader, towered over the others, his muscles rippling like a stormy sea. He grinned, sharp fangs flashing. Where is our offering? The villagers held their breath. And then, out of the shadows, Shiro stepped forward. His white hair shimmered, his eyes calm and steady. He was just one boy, alone. The giants snickered, their laughter like rustling chains scraping against stone. This is what you offer us? One hissed. Pathetic, sneered another. They grabbed Shiro's arm, the claws digging into his skin, and dragged him towards the forest. But Shiro was already working his magic. As they marched, Shiro closed his eyes and whispered, not with his mouth, but with his mind. His voice slipped into giants' heads, like a shadow creeping through a crack. The sky's fallen, he murmured. One giant's ear twitched. His steps faltered. The sky's falling, the voice repeated, louder this time. The giant looked up at the night sky, his eyes wide with terror. The sky is falling, he shrieked, covering his head as if the stars would rain down on him. Another giant whipped around, eyes darting. No, it's the ground! The ground will swallow us whole! They stumbled, their sharp claws clutching at each other in panic. The third giant, confused and angry, shoved the first one. You fool, the sky isn't falling. It's the ground that's cursed. No, you're wrong. The first giant snarled. The sky is about to crash down on us. Look at the moon. It's too big, and it's getting closer. Idiots! It's not the sky or the ground. It's the trees. They're watching us. Another giant screeched, looking wildly around. The giants began to argue, their growls echoing through the trees. One pushed another, horns clashing, while another grabbed his own tail, spinning in circles, like a confused little dog. Their leader snarled, "Enough! You're all acting like frightened children." But before he could restore order, Eka made his move. From the village's edge, Eka stood tall, his red hair whipping in the wind. He raised his fist and with a roar, slammed it into the ground. Boom! The earth groaned, the trees trembled, the ground beneath the giants cracked like a shattered glass. They screamed as their feet slipped into the breaking earth. Weapons clattered as they lost balance, tumbling over one another in a tangle of horns and tails. "We're doomed!" one of them wailed, his voice high-pitched with panic. The leader grabbed a nearby giant by the scruff of his neck and shook him. "Stop panicking! We must stay together!" But the giant, his eyes wide with terror, pointed a shaking claw at the cracks in the earth. "The ground is breaking! We're sinking! The world is ending!" Another giant grabbed his own leader by the horns and shouted at him, "This is all your fault! You led us into this trap!" "How dare you!" the leader roared, shoving him away. "We should have never come back here," shrieked one giant, climbing over his own kind to escape. Their army was no longer an army. They were a mess, tripping over each other, blaming each other, shoving, scrambling, screaming, and just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, it did, because Midori was ready for them. From behind the tree stump, Midori popped up. Midori popped up like a mischievous sprite, his green hair glowing in the moonlight. He took a deep breath and unleashed his most powerful joke. "Why don't skeletons fight each other?" he shouted. The giants blinked in confusion. Then he answered, "Because they don't have any guts." For a second, there was silence. Then boom! Laughter exploded like a wildfire. Giants doubled over, wheezing, gasping for air, rolling on the ground. Their sharp fangs were bared and wide, ridiculous grins, their fearsome eyes squinted shut with laughter. One pounded his fist against the dirt, howling. Another rolled straight into a tree, still chuckling like a fool. The leader, the biggest and the scariest of them all, was on his back, legs kicking wildly, clutching his belly as tears streamed down his face. "Stop! No more, please," he grasped between hiccups. Meanwhile, other giants were laughing so hard they forgot why they were even angry. Some hugged each other for support, while others lay on their backs, kicking feet helplessly like overturned beetles. Midori smirked, hands on his hips. "Ha! Works every time." Shiro stepped forward, his voice booming inside their heads. "Swear on your horns that you'll never come back. You'll never return here." The giant's leader nodded furiously, still giggling. "Yes, yes, we swear." Louder. Ika growled, crackling his knuckles. "We swear," the giants cried, bowing so low their horns scraped the ground. With that, they scrambled to their feet, tripping over themselves, and vanished into the darkness, their howls fading into the night. And just like that, the village was once again safe. As the last echoes of the defeated giants faded into the distant hills, a wave of cheers erupted. Like a joyful storm, the villagers rushed forward, their faces lit up with joy, their hands clapping and waving, Our heroes, our protectors, they cried, the three peas in a pod. But the most heartwarming moment came when their parents stepped forward. Their mother, her eyes brimming with tears, placed a gentle hand on each of their faces. "You've learned to control your gifts and use them for good," she said, her voice full of pride. Their father, who rarely ever showed his emotions, sniffled and quickly wiped his eyes. Then with a gruff chuckle, he pulled all three of them into a bear hug so tightly that they nearly popped like overripe tomatoes. "I always knew you three would do great things," he muttered, squeezing them one last time before letting go. Eika grinned and flexed his muscles. "Told you we'd be famous." Midori, still munching on a honey pastry, mumbled through a full mouth. "And we got free food. Best day ever." Shiro just smiled, looking up at the peaceful night sky, knowing the journey was far from over. So from that day on, the village flourished. Fear no longer gripped the people when the wind howled at night. Children slept peacefully, knowing that if darkness was to ever return, their three heroes would be there to protect. The once quiet village square now became a place of laughter and stories. People gathered around bonfire, telling the tale of three peas in a pod again and again, each time making the story bigger, wilder, and funnier. "They fought off 100 giants," one boy shouted. "No, 1,000," a little girl argued, throwing her hands in the air. And there, standing at the edge of the village, the three brothers watched it all, knowing no matter what came next, they will always be ready, because heroes never rest, and the three peas in a pod would protect their home forever. So my dear friends, the lesson that we learned from the story today is that teamwork is powerful. Each brother had a different ability, but it was only by working together they were able to defeat the giants. Shiro's wisdom, Eika's strength, and Midori's humor alone wasn't enough. But when they combined their gifts, they became unstoppable. Just like in real life, everyone has different strengths, but true success comes from supporting one another and working as a team, whether it's with family, friends, or community. Unity is the greatest power of all. With that, I'm going to say sayonara, which means goodbye, my friends. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. I'll see you in the next.